She hired him to carry couches, not her heartbreak. Natalie Quinn, a 38-year-old literary editor, had no intention of talking to the quiet, kind mover who showed up at her door. But Eli Turner wasn't just muscle. He was curiosity, comfort, and the unexpected pause she didn't know she needed. What began with boxed-up memories turned into something else entirely, a connection too honest to ignore. She told him, "You're too young to understand what I've lost," he said. "Then explain it. I'll listen." And he did every time. The door opened just enough to reveal a woman holding a coffee mug and an expression like she'd already been disappointed twice this morning. "You're early," Natalie said without looking at the clipboard in her hand. Eli Turner offered a faint apologetic smile. "Traffic was light. Want us to kill some time?" She opened the door wider with a shrug. "If you're already here, might as well start lifting." He stepped inside, gesturing for the second guy, Greg, to follow with the dolly. The apartment smelled like old books, lemon cleaner, and something floral that lingered beneath it all, like memory, the kind of smell you remember later when you can't place why someone made you feel something. Boxes were neatly stacked, labeled in capital letters, "Kitchen, bedroom, Misk don't open." She didn't offer them coffee, just the layout, the basics, bedroom furniture, first, then the bookshelves, couch second to last. The bed would be broken down already. She preferred to dismantle things herself. Eli glanced at the bookshelves along the wall. Hundreds of spines grouped by author rather than title or genre. Baldwin and Wolfe, side by side. "Baldwin and Wolfe," he said aloud. Natalie turned. "You're the first person to notice that." "I used to alphabetize my thoughts," he said. "Doesn't work as well as it sounds." She blinked, then gave him a look, half curiosity, half suspicion. "What's your degree in philosophy? Useless, unless you want to argue about metaphors at 2 a.m., he replied. "Sounds like my last relationship," she muttered, then immediately regretted saying it. Eli didn't flinch. Tense morning, Natalie pointed toward the bedroom. "Just move the furniture." He didn't talk much after that, which she appreciated. Greg put in earbuds and worked like a machine. Eli moved slower, more deliberate. She noticed he never dragged a box, always lifted, no corners, scraped, no furniture, bumped. Halfway through, she found herself watching him carry a stack of heavy art books like they were feather pillows. He caught her eye once. She looked away too quickly. When they took their break, Greg stepped outside to smoke. Eli lingered in the living room, sipping water from a bottle. Natalie sat on the floor across the room, leaning against the wall, her knees tucked up like armor. He glanced at the large canvas propped near the door. Abstract swaths of red and bone white splashed violently, but somehow balanced. "Yours?" he asked. She shook her head. "His. X." She didn't answer. Eli waited. Then she sighed. 10 years. He was a painter, I was the editor. We fit until we didn't. He nodded. "Who moved out first?" He did. "I stayed to finish the lease because I'm a masochist. Or maybe just stubborn. You packing all this yourself?" She looked around at the meticulous boxes. "Yeah, I can tell. The tape lines are clean. That's a precision wound." Natalie tilted her head. "Are you always this weirdly perceptive? Only when I'm avoiding my own problems?" She cracked a smile despite herself. "You're too young to understand what I've lost." Eli didn't blink. "Then explain it," he said. "I'll listen." It caught her off guard, not the words, the way he said them. No performance, no flirtation, just stillness. Like if she dropped the truth into his hands, he'd hold it carefully. Natalie stared at the water bottle in her lap. "I lost time," she said slowly. "I kept betting it would get better, that relationships had chapters, and maybe we were just in the wrong one. But then I woke up one day and realized I'd edited myself out of the story." Eli didn't speak. She looked up. "You're not going to tell me that's poetic," no, he said. "I was going to ask if it helped to say it out loud." She laughed once, short and bitter. "Only if you pretend not to look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like I'm someone worth understanding." He smiled faintly. Too late. They sat in silence a little longer. Then Greg returned, stomping snow off his boots. Eli stood and grabbed the next stack of boxes. By the time the apartment was nearly empty, Natalie walked through the living room, her steps echoing now. Only the couch remained and the bookshelves her shelves. She told them to leave those last. Eli leaned against one, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his wrist. I think we're done. Natalie nodded. She hesitated, then picked up a worn paperback from the floor. Baldwin's The Fire Next Time. She held it out. You quoted Baldwin earlier. I live by him, Eli said, taking the book gently. A gift from one misfit to another. He turned it over as if unsure whether he deserved to keep it. I'm just a mover, he said quietly. You're more than that, she replied, but you already know. He looked at her. She held his gaze. I'll walk the last box out myself, she said. He didn't stop her, but he watched and she let him, because maybe for the first time in a long time being seen didn't feel like something to avoid. It felt like a beginning, even if it had nowhere to go. 3 days passed before Natalie saw him again, not that she was counting. The new apartment smelled like primer and lemon oil. It was quieter than the last one, higher ceilings, less street noise, fewer memories too, which was the point. The move had come and gone. The boxes placed the furniture assembled. The walls remained mostly bare except for one shelf lined with the books she unpacked first, her true constants. But that Friday afternoon, the doorbell rang while she was half wrapped in a blanket and halfway through an email marked urgent. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, Eli Turner stood there with a small, square box in his hands. Found this in the back of the truck, he said, lifting it slightly, tucked behind a wheelbase. Must have slid during the move. Natalie blinked. I didn't even notice anything missing. It's not labeled, he said, offering it to her like it was fragile. She took it, running her fingers over the untaped flap. There was a pause. You want to come in, she asked before she could stop herself. Eli didn't hesitate. Sure, the apartment wasn't furnished yet in the way homes are. No artwork, no accent pillows, no plants, but it was clean and minimal, and Eli noticed that every book was already alphabetized. He sat on a stool at her kitchen island while she opened the mystery box. Inside old notebooks, a pair of black gloves, and one Polaroid photo her years younger, smiling at the edge of a lake. Natalie stared at it for a second too long. From a cabin trip, she said quietly. Back when I still thought there were rules to love, like if you followed them, you'd win. You stopped believing that, Eli asked. She smiled without humor. Eventually, yeah. Turns out love doesn't reward good behavior. Eli tilted his head. Maybe it just rewards honesty. You think so? I think most people are scared of wanting something that might want them back. Natalie looked up from the photo. Is that your philosophical wisdom or lived experience? Bit of both, he said softly. They lapsed into silence. Then she asked, why are you really here? Eli didn't look away. I wanted to know if you meant what you said. Which part? That I'm more than just a mover. She set the photo down and leaned against the counter. You remembered that. I remember a lot of things when people say them like they almost didn't want to. Natalie folded her arms. What would it mean if I did mean it? It would mean I'm not wrong for thinking about you. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Eli stood slowly. I should go, he said, the air shifting. She didn't stop him, but she watched him all the way to the door. Right before he stepped out, she called softly. You were right. He turned. I did almost want to say it. He smiled, small, warm. Next time, maybe don't, almost. That night, Natalie poured a glass of wine and opened one of her old notebooks from the box. Inside was a page torn from a poetry collection taped into the middle. Her own handwriting beneath it read, One day I'll stop folding myself to fit. She touched the ink and thought of Eli's hands, the way he held things like they mattered. The next morning, she found herself in the bookstore cafe across from her building. She'd been there before, but never for longer than 5 minutes. She didn't expect to see him there sitting at a table near the window with a half-empty cup of coffee and a book in his hand. He looked up and didn't smile right away. Then he did. She walked over slowly. Do you come here often? She teased. Only when I'm trying to be accidentally found, he said. Natalie sat across from him. Well, lucky accident. They talked not about big things, but about the sound of rain on old rooftops, about how some songs ruin you in the best way, about teachers that disappointed them, and books that healed them. When she finally glanced at the clock, an hour had passed. I should go, she said. Where to? She paused. Nowhere urgent, then stay. She hesitated, then nodded, and they stayed, two strangers orbiting the edge of something neither of them had dared name yet, but it was real and it was beginning. The first real snow came quietly. Natalie watched it fall from her bedroom window like a silent confession. Her fingers curled around the mug in her hands. Black tea, not coffee, not today. Something gentler for a morning that had started soft. She didn't expect the knock at her door. Eli wasn't due. He hadn't been due since he returned the lost box. And yet he'd managed to drift back into her life the way sunlight crept through a half-closed curtain. Slow, warm, not entirely invited. She opened the door. He was there bundled in a scarf and gloves, holding 2 croissants in a brown paper bag. "Don't worry," he said before she could speak. "This is entirely a bribe for 15 minutes of your time and your opinion on my future." She blinked. "You brought baked goods to negotiate life decisions." He held up the bag. "They're from that place on 6th. I know what I'm doing." Natalie stepped aside. "Come in." 15 minutes turned into 30. They sat on the floor again. Something about couches felt too formal. She had pulled a throw blanket around her knees and Eli had stripped off his coat but left the scarf loosely wrapped. "Teaching," he said after a long sip of tea. "It keeps calling me, but I can't tell if it's my ego or my purpose." Natalie studied him. "You think you want it because it's noble." He grinned. "Yeah, and I hate how much I want to sound noble." "You want to matter," she said gently. "That's not ego. That's longing." He looked at her. Something passed between them, unspoken, shaped like mutual recognition. Then she shifted, lifting a second mug. "I was 24 when I realized books weren't just things I loved. They were the only things I trusted." "You still trust them?" Natalie hesitated. "Not always, but I trust the silence they leave when they're done." Eli nodded slowly, letting the quiet settle. "You ever think," he said, "that maybe all we're really doing is waiting for someone to hear the thing we didn't say?" Her breath caught. She didn't answer. Instead, she stood walking toward her bookshelf. "You want to stay for dinner?" she asked over her shoulder. Eli blinked. "Is that a trick question?" She pulled down a cookbook worn at the edges. "Only if you insist on helping." He stood. "I insist." They cooked in tandem, awkward at first, bumping elbows and mismatching rhythms, but gradually they moved in sync. Saute, stir, taste, tease. "Careful," she warned, swatting his hand away from the sauce. "That's for the meal." He smirked. "I thought I was the meal." She gave him a look. "You're definitely the appetizer." That earned a startled laugh from him. By the time they sat down at her small kitchen table, the snow was thick outside, blanketing the street lamp glow in silence. They ate slowly, talked easily. Then, "Can I ask something personal?" he said, wiping his mouth. Natalie arched a brow. "You haven't already?" "Okay, fair," he conceded, "but really, do you think it's ever too late to start again?" She didn't answer immediately. Then, setting down her fork, she met his gaze. "Not if you start with something true." Eli leaned forward. "And what's your truth?" "I'm scared of needing someone again," she whispered. "And I'm even more scared that I already do." The words hung in the air between them like fog. He reached out slowly and placed his hand over hers. "Then let's be scared together," he said. That night they didn't sleep together, but he stayed curled beside her on the couch legs, tangled their breathing in quiet sync. The television glowed in the background, ignored. Her head rested against his shoulder, and his hand found hers in the dark. They said nothing and everything all at once. The snow stuck for 3 days. Natalie found herself craving the hush it brought to the city, the way everything slowed. Even the silence in her apartment felt less like absence and more like a pause she was finally ready to inhabit. Eli didn't come by the next day or the day after. She didn't ask why. But when he texted, "I walked past your street today." "Your window was lit up like something waiting to be read," she replied. "Funny, I was thinking about turning the page." That night, she opened her curtains and left the light on just in case. They met again the following Saturday. He was waiting in the corner of the bookstore cafe again, scarf unwrapped, sleeves pushed up, journal open beside his coffee. He didn't see her right away. He was scribbling something, one hand in his hair. Natalie watched him for a moment from the doorway. There was something about the way he inhabited space, not loudly, not with the ego of a man trying to impress. He just was present, attentive, unhurried. It felt rare. She approached slowly. "You always look like you're thinking about the end of the world." "In here," she said. He looked up startled and smiled like a fire being coaxed to life. "Only the small ones." She set her gloves down. "Which one today?" End of pretending I don't want to kiss you every time you look at me like that. She blinked. And how am I looking at you like you're afraid you already love me a little? The air between them crackled. She laughed once softly. You're dangerous. I'm 26, he replied deadpan. I've been told that's the definition. They walked after coffee. The sidewalks were wet with melt and grit, the streets busy with bundled pedestrians and weekend strollers. They moved slowly, hands bumping, but not quite touching. She wore a dark coat, her scarf tucked high, her hair pulled back, composed elegant as always, but her eyes held something else now, an openness edged with hesitation. He stopped in front of a bookstore window. There was a handwritten sign taped inside. All stories begin with risk. He turned to her. Do you believe that Natalie looked past the words to her own reflection? I used to, and now I'm here, aren't I? Later, back in her apartment, she stood in the kitchen pouring tea. He leaned against the counter, watching her silent. The warmth in the room was thick with tension, not conflict, but gravity, like something unspoken was about to surface. You didn't come over earlier this week, she said, finally not turning around. I didn't want to push, Eli said, or assume. She handed him a cup. You're not assuming if you're wanted. He took it slowly, their fingers brushed. You scare me, Natalie, he said softly. She looked up. Good. He laughed once breathless. That wasn't the answer I expected. You shouldn't expect anything from me. That's the safest thing. I don't want safe. The teacups were forgotten. She stepped back, leaned against the opposite counter, arms crossed. You think this is going somewhere? She asked, voice cooler than she meant it to be. He met her gaze. I think it already is somewhere. She turned away. You're 26. You'll leave, find someone less complicated, someone your age who wants babies and matching Halloween costumes. You're projecting. I'm being realistic. He crossed the room, not quickly, but with certainty. He stopped inches from her. I've done casual, he said. I've done easy, and none of it felt like this. Her breath caught. This, he continued, is inconvenient, confusing, but it's also the first thing that's made me feel like myself in a long time. She looked up at him, eyes wide. You don't know all of me. He reached for her hand, then show me. And she did. They didn't rush. They moved like two people building trust with touch, not conquering. When he kissed her, it was quiet, deep, full of patience and restraint and tension finally released. He kissed her like someone who wasn't going to ask for more than she could give, but who would gladly hold every part she offered. They made their way to her bedroom in silence, lit only by the city light bleeding through the windows. He touched her like a reverent question. She answered with her body, every breath, every shift, every sigh. There was no music, no performance, just warmth, skin, stillness broken by the soft sound of connection. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets, bare and breathless. He pressed his lips to her shoulder. Still scared, he whispered. Terrified, she said, eyes closed, but she didn't let go. The next morning, she woke before him. Sunlight cut across his back. The sheet had slipped low, revealing the slope of muscle and softness. He looked peaceful, unburdened. She reached for her robe, slipped out of bed, and walked to the kitchen. As she boiled water, she felt the familiar itch of anxiety. What now? She hadn't planned for him to stay the night. She hadn't planned for any of this. By the time she poured 2 mugs of coffee, he was in the doorway, pulling on his shirt. Hey, he said, voice rasped with sleep. Morning, she replied. You okay? She nodded. Are you? He crossed to her, kissed her cheek. Better than I've been in years. She handed him the mug. So what do we do now? He sipped. We keep going. She raised an eyebrow. That easy no, he said, but I'm not afraid of hard. She leaned against the counter. That's because you haven't seen all my damage yet. Eli stepped closer. Then show me that too. She smiled, small but real. He stayed until noon, and when he left, she didn't feel like she was losing something. She felt like she was building it slowly, deliberately, one breath at a time. Natalie didn't hear from Eli for 2 days. It wasn't silence, not really. There were no bruised egos or angry texts, no sharp exits or dramatic disappearances. Just space, the kind you didn't realize was holding air until you tried to breathe without it. He hadn't said goodbye. He hadn't said anything which made her even more afraid of what she was feeling. On the third day, she saw him by accident, or fate, the corner of Mulberry and 8th, where the bookstore curved around into a tiny used record shop. She was walking home, her coat collar up, scarf-tight bag, heavy with manuscripts. He was standing inside the glass, flipping through vinyl, alone, intent. His hair had grown slightly longer. He looked tired in that noble way people do when their thoughts have kept them company too long. She stopped walking, just stood there on the sidewalk, heart pounding in a way that annoyed her. She wasn't a girl. She didn't do street-staring epiphanies. She didn't wait in doorways, didn't hope like this anymore. But something about him standing there unaware of her gaze present in his own orbit, reminded her of why she let him in the first place, because he wasn't asking her to be anyone. He was just asking her to be. She pushed open the door. The bell above it chimed soft and sweet. He looked up. Their eyes met, and for a second, neither of them moved. Then he smiled. "You again." "I'm always me," she said, stepping closer, "but you seem a little quieter today." He shrugged. "Been thinking. Dangerous." He held up a record. "Tell me this doesn't look like an argument we'd have." She glanced at the sleeve, Tom Waits' Rain Dogs. "Please," she scoffed. "You'd quote lyrics, I'd call you pretentious, we'd both end up drunk." He laughed. "Accurate." She hesitated. "Why'd you disappear?" His smile faded. "I didn't," he said. "I just didn't know how to keep showing up without asking for too much." Natalie tilted her head. "And what's too much to you?" "Wishing I could be more than a chapter in your reset story." The words hit deeper than she expected. She stepped forward. "You were never a chapter," she said. "You were the part that made me want to write again." He looked at her, vulnerable, a little stunned. "I don't know what this is," she whispered. "I don't know what it wants to be, but I know I've been alone for so long that your voice in the room feels like music." Eli didn't respond right away. Then quietly, "You still scare me?" "Good," she said. He smiled. "You want to take this outside? I think we owe each other a sidewalk moment." They walked through the city like it wasn't the middle of January. No gloves, hands out, breaths visible in the cold. He told her about a job interview, adjunct position, community college, a chance to teach intro ethics to 18-year-olds who might not care but might remember him later anyway. "I'm not sure it's enough," he said, "but I think it's a place to start." "You don't have to impress me with ambition," she replied. "I'm already impressed you do your own laundry." He nudged her shoulder. "I like your sharp edges. I like your soft center." He glanced at her. "So what now?" She stopped walking. They were on the bridge now, just far enough out of earshot from the buzz of the city. The lights cast a low, amber glow. The water below churned with calm dissonance. Natalie looked out across it. "We name things too early," he waited. She turned to him. "We're not a relationship. We're not an experiment. We're not a failure waiting to happen." "Then what are we?" She took his hand, and for once she didn't deflect. "We're possible." They didn't label anything after that. They just continued dinners, walks, late-night texts that turned into visits, a toothbrush that found its way into her drawer, a book he left on her nightstand, a hoodie she wore when she made tea. One night she was editing a memoir and found him asleep on the couch, a pen tucked behind his ear and her cat in his lap. She took a picture, then deleted it. Some moments weren't meant for keeping, they were meant for holding. Weeks passed. Then one evening, Eli came through the door, holding a letter. Natalie looked up from the table. "What's that?" He handed it to her. She read it, adjunct hire, starting in April. "I got it," he said, grinning. "It's not much, but it's mine." She looked up at him. "You're staying," she said. "I was never leaving." Natalie stood cross to him, kissed him. Not like an apology, not like a promise, just a kiss from a woman who finally knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to name it. Later that night, as they lay in bed, legs tangled, the windows humming with soft wind, Natalie whispered, "I used to think the only way to start over was alone." Eli traced her collarbone with his fingertip. "And now I think maybe starting with someone honest is the bravest version." He smiled into her neck. "Then we're being very brave." And she smiled back, eyes closed, heart, open, story still unfolding. The story of Natalie Quinn and Eli Turner unveils a timeless lesson. True healing begins when we allow ourselves to be seen raw and unguarded by someone who listens without judgment. Natalie, a 38-year-old editor scarred by a decade of lost love, hid behind her meticulously packed boxes and sharp wit, convinced solitude was her safest refuge. Yet Eli, a young mover with a philosopher's heart, didn't just carry her furniture, he carried space for her truth. His quiet question, then explain it. I'll listen cracked open her defenses, showing that connection blooms not from grand gestures, but from honest presence. Their story teaches us that vulnerability is a risk worth taking. Natalie's fear of needing someone again mirrored our own hesitations to trust. Yet Eli's persistence, his refusal to let her pain define her, reminds us that love can rewrite our endings. We learn that age-past wounds or differences don't dictate connection, courage does. By choosing to stay to share silences and stories, they built something possible, a fragile, beautiful beginning. This is a call to embrace the people who see you, who hold your truths gently, and to step into the scary, sacred act of being known. What's a moment when someone's presence helped you heal? Drop your story in the comments. We're all here to listen. If this touched your heart, subscribe to our channel for more stories of hope and human connection. Let's keep building a community that celebrates brave beginnings,